Thank you so much. Very good morning. Very proud to actually follow up exactly after Namayatri. I think the real future would be Namayatri actually starts flying planes that we make. Right, so I mean, why not? We should actually be aspiring for that. So let me just start with a short video. Let me see if I can play this. Can you play this video? Who is this? Not playable? We can't play this? Okay. It should be. I don't know exactly. Yeah, let's just move on to what I have to talk about. So we are building something called the E200X, which is the code name for the aircraft that we are building. The primary use cases for this are healthcare, cargo, and people transport. Of course, people transport is what many of us would actually be interested in, but I think healthcare in terms of air ambulance is also pretty important. The starting version of this that we will actually commercialize in the nearest future would actually carry 3 people. That would include a pilot, though. So it's actually 1 pilot plus 2 passengers, but upgradable to 1 pilot plus 4 passengers over time. It has the shortest footprint of about 8 meters wingspan. For this kind of capacity, we are aggressively the most shortest in the world. The next nearest is about 12 meters, and then 14 or 16 meters or other renderings that are happening in around other parts of the world. The reason why we want to actually obviously be aggressively the shortest wingspan is to be able to land on rooftops of buildings and so on. So a fairly spacious cabin that can actually expand to include 2 more people, fairly slow speed so that we can actually do multiple short trips in a single charge, and so on. We recently signed order books with ICAT or Empire Aviation, ETAC, Modair, and as well as we have an MOU with CSIR NAL in Bangalore. And all of these are actually worth more than about $1 billion in revenues that are potentially can happen. What you might be interested in knowing is what do I pay? And we've done calculations for a typical 30-kilometer trip that might be somewhere in the middle of Bangalore to the airport, for example, or maybe middle of Bangalore to the electronic city on the other side, and so on. You might actually end up paying something like about 2,300 rupees, which is maybe about 1.5 to 1.8 times a Uber fare for the same distance, but could actually bring down the time of travel to about 8 times less than what you would actually do on the surface. And of course, with a good amount of profit per trip for the operator. So it's good for the pocket on both sides is a potential proposition. It's also good on the planet is the point that I would like to make in this particular audience. So we did these calculations that basically saying if all of the Bangalore's taxis were to be actually replaced by the air taxis, potentially each taxi is actually getting stuck on the road with the traffic and could do about maximum of 10 trips of 30 kilometers each. Typically, most taxis do much less than 30 kilometers distance, so they may end up actually doing about 20 to 30 trips. But if you were to actually think in terms of 30-kilometer trips, it could be less than about 10 in a day. But the air taxi is capable of doing something like about 50 trips. And many of these taxi travels are actually single passenger rides. Considering all of those things, the sheer throughput that's possible with getting these air taxis to ferry around people, taking into account charging times, all of those, we could actually show that the carbon dioxide emissions out of these would actually be much less. And this would actually be the starting point for us to push into the aviation CO2 emissions that we will want to tackle going forward into the future in the next 10 years or so. We have a certain IP that allows us to actually fly slowly with a very compact wingspan, making use of the vertical rotors, taking inspiration from NASA's distributed electric propulsion for forward flights. This has actually been filed in about 30 countries as patents, and we've actually got it granted in 6 countries, including India, published in 5, and expected to be granted in other countries as well. And there are more more patents to be filed, of course. On the left-hand side of this slide are actually all the hardware stack that we develop. On the right-hand side is the software stack that we develop. So we are kind of fairly vertically integrated as far as the aircraft alone is concerned, but we also actually get into things like ground control software, fleet management software, and all of those things for multiple aircraft to operate at the same time. But we do actually have fairly marquee supply chain people, so that we will be able to get our certification fairly easily. What I would like to actually also highlight is the safety standards that we uphold on these aircraft. That's something that must be uppermost in the minds of lots of people. We have about 5 levels of safety, and this is something that we have not really seen any other eVTOL company in the world put out. So we are a lift plus cruise configuration, which means that we have an independent way of holding the weight of the aircraft with vertical rotors. We have an independent way of holding the weight of the aircraft with the wings, and we can actually do a conventional landing if required. We can glide to safety. We have parachutes and inflatables for soft landing in case all hell breaks loose on board. And if even that fails, we can actually, and we happen to crash, we can actually withstand about a 16G impact, and the cabin would still survive. And the probability of any of these failures that happens also is actually extremely low, with lots of redundancies on the powertrain. When is it all going to happen? It's actually around the corner. We expect to have our first prototype of the air ambulance by middle of this year, by June. End of this year, we should actually have the second prototype. Beginning of next year should be the third prototype. Flying all of them cumulatively to clock the hours required for certification. We expect to get our certification by end of 2026 as the first version. But we will also actually now look at the air taxi. Keep in mind the first prototype is happening by the middle of this year. But after we finish the air ambulance prototypes, we will turn to the air taxi prototypes, and then we need to do a supplementary type certification. So once we get our certification for the air ambulance in end of 2026, in about another 3 months, we should actually get the air taxi certified. So the wait is for about a couple of more years for this to happen in reality, with all the testing that we will be able to do and get the certification done. And similarly, the air cargo would actually be another 3 months later in the middle of 2027. We have a team with lots of experienced people, with test pilots and people from the military, as well as from aviation sector and software and so on, with cumulatively about 200 plus years of experience from about 120 plus people. I think this is not very important in this particular thing. We have raised about 20 million US dollars in about 3 rounds. And some of the climate, so one of the things that I could actually highlight is some of the climate funding people are actually as part of our cap table, which is something that I'm proud about in this particular audience. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Incubated at IIT Madras, the ePlane Co. is building India's first and the world's most compact flying electric taxi with a vision to make flying ubiquitous. Founded by Professor Satya Chakravarthy, we're the first private Indian company to receive DGCA-DOA. Our team has designed, developed, manufactured, assembled, and tested. ATVA, India's most sustainable fixed-wing hybrid eVTOL drone. Optimal for imaging and logistics applications. Now ready to be commercialized. E50, the subscale prototype of the flying taxi, has been tested and successfully flown. It's India's largest drone, 3 by 3 meter sized, now building the passenger flying taxi first prototype. Further prototyping and flight trials for certification, we've built autonomous flight paths for collision avoidance. We'll set up autonomous ATCs for safe landing. On vertiports, on vertihubs, and on vertip stops, you can fly on demand by booking the ePlane on your phone at accessible pricing. Fly in the world's most compact air taxi soon. Built in India for the world.